So I recently played Diablo 2 Resurrected, and while it wasn't a bad game, it very much felt like a museum trip to 20 years ago, which it frankly is, just with a new coat of paint. Still, I was aware that there exist people who consider it to be vastly superior to Diablo 3. Not even just the Resurrected version, just Diablo 2 still being so much better than Diablo 3. And so I went to the Battle.net forums to read what exactly they had to say for themselves, and they're all huffing nostalgia. Like, tons of it. But, well, they had their arguments, and so I decided I was gonna have a little rant about them. So, first thing, the plot. There was the argument that Diablo 3 did dirty to some beloved Diablo 2 characters and therefore the plot sucks. I assume they're talking about Deckard Cain dying. Spoilers. And maybe they didn't like the treatment of Tyrael. Whatever. While the Diablo 2 plot isn't bad, it's still Diablo. It's not exactly known for its compelling and complex story. So I think in terms of plot, it's just a wash. Both games have decent enough plot. There's nothing horrible in Diablo 3 unless you're just, oh, it's the sequel that's spoiling my beloved childhood thing, which, I mean, whatever. Objectively, they're just a bit different. It's fine. Second thing, the darkness and edginess. Apparently, Diablo 3 is bright and cartoony, whereas Diablo 2 is dark and sinister. Well, no. There's plenty of edgy visuals in Diablo 3. Whimsy share aside, I mean, that's an Easter egg, that's whatever. But Diablo 2, on top of having some relatively light and bright areas, the dark ones are mostly just physically dark, as in you can't see shit. They're not like extra edgy or evil looking, they're just fucking dark. I mean, light radius is a stat that you can increase with items, but mostly not being able to see shit in a game that's not survival horror, by the way, is just not a good thing. This is not a bonus. This is advantage Diablo 3. Anyway, on to the big things, like build variety. So, supposedly, Diablo 2 has much more viable builds. But Diablo 2 ends after you beat Baal on the highest difficulty. Like, what was it? Inferno? The third one. Like, of course, you can keep playing with that character and kill Baal again and again, and it'll be easier. You can go kill something even easier, I guess. It's still, like, you're done. Whereas in Diablo 3, you have infinite difficulty through rifts. Greater rifts, specifically. And if you compare at the point where Diablo 2 just ends, which is the campaign, then Diablo 3 has way more builds that you can use. You can beat Diablo 3 campaign, even on, I think, Inferno 16, but definitely on the regular Inferno, with like almost any build. Just throw something together, grind up good enough items, and you're good. And that's on top of the builds, what they consist of in Diablo 3 being far more synergies than Diablo 2, where you're usually just like spamming one skill, maybe two. And you can have like a couple of passives somewhere in there. Diablo 3, you're generally gonna use all 6 buttons and have, at this point, 4 passives that augment your build. And the synergies between them all matter. Like, it's just no real comparison unless, as some of the guys in those forums were pointing out, you need to use the super OP sets to be competitive on the leaderboards for the G-Rifts. Which, well, yeah, but that's just not a thing in Diablo 2, so you can't compare them on that. Anyway, I have to give one point here to Diablo 2 though, which is assigning stats. Because you get to assign your 4 basic stats manually, and I did really feel like I want all of them. Whereas in Diablo 3, you can't directly assign them, you can just switch your gear around, and there's a balance between your damage stat and vitality, but it's not as impactful as it is in Diablo 2. But these are... That's a minor point. In terms of build variety, Diablo 3 just wins. Next point. Itemization, loot, gear, whatever. So the complaint there from the Diablo 2 stance is that in Diablo 3 you are showered with gear. Like, you get literal fountains and you don't have to grind for it, and you are and the loot is tailored to you, so you don't have to trade for it with anyone, blah blah blah. Which, I mean, it's true that it is more available in Diablo 3, but not like that insanely more. I would agree that it kind of went from one ditch into the other along its lifetime. Like, there was Diablo 3 loot was basically the same as Diablo 2 on launch, and it sucked absolute ass, so they made it more generous and they made it drop stuff predominantly for your class, not just totally random shit you have no use for. And they did slightly overdo it with the amount of stuff and how fast you can get there, and especially with the sets that now have like these 140 times damage combos, which I don't like those. I'd rather the sets just didn't exist. But it's not perfect, but it's so much better than Diablo 2. Because in Diablo 2, I barely got any gear through my playthrough. I only played through the first difficulty, but as I understand, there isn't that much difference in the next ones, and like, it was fine to do it basically for a lot of experience one time. I don't want to do 2 more runs, especially if they're going to be just as grindy with so little incremental rewards along the way. Like, I had some Act 1 pieces that I only swapped out in Act 4. Somebody listed that as a bonus in the forums, that you can find pieces very early on that remain useful for a long time, which is of course just another way of saying it's not dropping shit. So that's bad. It's an ARPG. It's like half the game is gearing. I need like incremental increases in my gear, you know, to keep that to keep me pulling that lever on the Skinner box, keep me excited, to keep something progressing. Well, besides the plot, which only works on the one playthrough. Like, I was getting items that are meant for level 4 in Act 5. What's the point? I was about to fight Bale when a dexterity +1 ring dropped. I mean, I guess that's the best I could come up with in the 20th century, but game development has advanced since then. You don't need to pretend that that was good. We're doing better now, it's fine. And to the people who suggested that not having to trade is like a negative, have they noticed how much storage space there is in Diablo 2? or rather isn't. Because if you're supposed to grind for months to gather some just rare items, not items that are good for you actually, just like a bunch of rares, and then walk, well, uniques, but I mean rare in the real world sense, rare, and then you walk around online lobbies and you look for people who have done the same and who need something of yours and have something that you need. If that's your idea of a cool gearing system for a hack and slash game, yep, the Diablo 2 you go. The rest of us will somewhere else. To sum up the itemization, well, Diablo 3 does at this point give you a bit too much too fast. It was a bit of an overcorrection, and the billion% damage sets are kind of stupid. It's still far and away better than just having to grind for months to get anything. Oh, also, Diablo 2 has charms. You know those little bonuses you have to carry around in your inventory so they eat up your already tiny inventory space? Like, fuck that. So, those were generally the Diablo 2 stand arguments. But there's more they weren't even talking about, because there's just no comparison. I'm gonna talk about those things too, like gameplay. The smoothness, the control, the not just spamming one spell and chugging potions. Like, in some fights in Diablo 2, I was literally teleporting out mid-fight to buy more potions to chug. Like in a boss fight. That's some year 2000 game design. So yeah, boss design is also so much better in Diablo. Actually, all enemy design, but boss design especially, because the bosses are actually balanced around how hard they're supposed to be at a certain level of difficulty, and so there's like a decent difficulty curve, and you can pick the difficulty from easy all the way to good luck killing that boss unless you have very good gear. But in any case, they have mechanics that you can play around, like all of them. In Diablo 2, I think everything up to Diablo was fucking brain dead. Like, it just charges at you and hits you, kills you in like 3 hits. Also, they tend to slow you, so you can't kite very well. Basically, if the arena is big enough, you can kind of kite them around. If it's not, then you can deal some damage, die, run back to the corpse, maybe pick up your gear that drops because reasons, maybe not even, because probably more important in higher difficulties. In the first one, like the gear was almost unnecessary a lot of the time. It's like made things easier, but some of these bosses I was mostly fighting naked, just because the gear had dropped somewhere and there was no point picking it up. Because that would lead to me dealing less damage, because as I'm picking it up, the boss is killing me. So, yeah, there's just no comparison. Diablo 3 bosses are miles better. In summary, it's just an improvement in every aspect, even if it didn't get everything perfect. Here's to hoping that Diablo 4 will come out and it will make those things perfect. Hopefully we won't have 14,000% sets, but something more interesting and incremental so that there can be more builds that are competitive at ultra late game. Until then, guess I'll just have to play Diablo 3. Unless there's something else that everyone has slept on, like that I don't know about. I've tried like Path of Exile, I couldn't be arsed with the like one spell spam and endless loot showers, like worse than Diablo 3 Fall Wars. Or then I played 40k Inquisitor, which just got kind of too repetitive. I've played Lost Ark, which basically doesn't have any gearing, like honing, get the fuck out. Yeah, if there's something I might just not know, please write it in the comments. I want to know. Otherwise, I'm just waiting and praying that they're not gonna fuck Diablo 4 up. There's a chance, right? There's a chance that they won't fuck up Diablo 4.